Hello and welcome to the pre-show lecture for Romeo and Juliet, our Playing Shakespeare with Deutsche Bank production from 2019, directed by Michael Oakley and starring Charlotte Beaumont and Nathan Welsh. My name's Will Tosh and I'm Research Fellow and Lecturer at Shakespeare's Globe. Now, no one needs a lecture about how to enjoy a play, and I hope you love the show as much as our live audiences at the Globe. But if you want to know a little bit more about Shakespeare's greatest love story, or you're studying the play at school, then I hope the next few minutes will give you some ideas. I'm going to suggest 3 things to look out for and think about as you watch the show. First thing, watch out for the way Shakespeare does things with spoilers. You'll already know how the play starts, with a prologue spoken by the chorus that begins, "Two households, both alike in dignity," and then proceeds to sketch out the shape of the story, including the deaths of the star-crossed lovers. And at first glance, this might seem like a bit of an odd move. Why give away the big ending? And in fact, this prologue is a bit unusual. In no other play does Shakespeare include an opening speech that reveals the whole plot. And in fact, when the play was printed, this chorus speech, was only included in early editions. Later on, it got left out. So what's going on? I think it'll help us to look at the language of that opening speech and notice the reiteration of words and phrases that suggest doom. Fatal loins, star-crossed, misadventured, fearful passage, death-marked, and all of those are in the space of 5 lines. This is a very high bandwidth for content suggestive of a grim destiny. And I reckon it tells us that Shakespeare was worrying less about giving away the ending, as he was ensuring that the key theme of his play was obvious from the get-go, that Romeo and Juliet's passion is the outcome of their family's feud, not a courageous strike against it. And it's their death, not their love, that will bring about a glooming peace, as the prince puts it in the final lines of the play. The second thing to bear in mind is language. Romeo and Juliet belongs to a group of plays written in the middle of the 1590s that saw Shakespeare make a quantum leap with the way he worked with words. Much of the poetry in Romeo and Juliet has an intensity and power to it that was new to Shakespeare's drama, a quality that scholars call lyricism, after lyric, the word we use for a line of song or poetry that carries intense feeling. Remember, I suggested that Shakespeare's key theme was the tragic destiny of the 2 lovers. And this is an idea that he returns to again and again in lines throughout the play that develop and enrich that basic theme by their vivid and new-minted poetry. Romeo's mind misgives some consequence yet hanging in the stars. Juliet realizes her only love has sprung from her only hate, and her ill-divining soul presents her a vision of Romeo dead as one in the bottom of a tomb. And just to twist the knife, Shakespeare has Romeo delude himself in Act 5 with the thought that his dreams presage some joyful news at hand, moments before he receives misleading news that Juliet has died. In Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare makes language work for him, harnessing the power of poetry and a whole toolkit of rhetorical techniques and tricks to illuminate character and turbocharge the plot. If some of the lines you hear in the show stick in your mind, it might be because they have been precision engineered by Shakespeare to be super memorable and to ensure that we never forget the story of Juliet and her Romeo. The last of my top 3 things to think about is form, by which I mean structure and the shape of Shakespeare's writing. So again, remember that speech from the start of the play by the chorus? If you look in your copies of the play, you'll see another speech from the chorus at the top of Act 2, which has been cut for this production, but begins in the original text, "Now old desire doth in his deathbed lie." And in this speech, the chorus emphasises that Romeo and Juliet are equally bewitched with each other, having just met at the Capulet party. And like the opening number, this speech gives a hint of what's to come. The chorus says that passion will lend the lovers power to meet in secret. And it's similar to the opening speech in another way too. It's a sonnet, a particular kind of 14-line poetry that was very popular in Shakespeare's day as a way of expressing profound emotion. The sonnet form tells an Elizabethan listener and watcher that the matter at hand is passionate, although in fact both the chorus speeches are a little untypical of the sonnets of the time in being drenched with foreboding and alarm. And these aren't the only sonnets in the play. Take the very moment Romeo and Juliet meet. In Act 1, Scene 5, at the Capulet party. Their first exchange, running from Romeo's line, "If I profane with my unworthiest hand," to the point that they kiss, is itself a shared sonnet in which each lover has a 4-line stanza to themselves, they share the next 4-line verse, and then take a line each of the rhyming couplet at the end. It's a beautiful, beautiful moment, capturing the fact that their overwhelming passion for each other is real and authentically felt, but also creating a connection through form with the doom-laden predictions of the chorus. This is Shakespeare composing at the level of structure and rhythm, creating connections between the play's moments, characters and themes with the raw materials of poetic form itself. Look out for the moment of Romeo and Juliet's electric first meeting when you watch our production, and tell me that you don't feel a charge. That's mostly the power of Nathan and Charlotte's performances, but it's also the power of language and form from a playwright at the top of his game. That's all from me. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy the production, and check out our Playing Shakespeare website for lots more supporting materials and hints for further study of Romeo and Juliet and many more of Shakespeare's plays.